Welcome to Elevate Your Mind, your number one podcast for peak performance strategies that will enhance your mindset, develop your emotional skill set, and maybe, just maybe, be the catalyst to create positive forward momentum in your life. Here's what's to come from today's pod.
Why? That is why, guys, we use the emotions, and I know it's backwards the way that I'm explaining this. It's different to what you've heard before, but you've only ever heard things from a mental aspect. I come at them from a deeper emotional aspect. This is how I can help people create shifts in days, and they've been stuck for decades. Boom, welcome back to the podcast, guys. Welcome back to Elevate Your Mind. I hope you are very, very well. Happy Easter to you. I hope you are having a lovely, lovely time with friends, with family, with close loved ones. Hope and wishing you a very, very happy Easter. Today's particular episode is this. What's the emotion that you use most often? Different way of asking. What is the emotion that you use most often? Because as I've said to you before, we all use emotions. You use confidence, you use anger, you use fear, you use passion, you use anxiety, you use any feeling, any emotion, you use it. And you use it to meet deeper emotional needs. I come back to my question. What one do you use most often? And if you need to, pause me right now on your speakers or on your phones or wherever you're listening to me on YouTube. Pause me for a moment and give this some thought. Because the emotion that you use most often is the emotion that you do two things with. You feel most familiar with and you feel most comfortable with. Now, some of you now are listening to me and you're watching me on the screen going, but my emotion wasn't a good emotion. Mine was anxiety or fear or worry or doubt. Well, here's the thing. Why do you use it? Because it is the most familiar and it is the most comfortable emotion for you to go to. And in this particular episode, I'm going to break this down for you, and you're going to hear this in a way that you've never done previously, like what so many people have told me that the way I explain these things is so different to anything I've ever heard. That's why I get results with people that they've never had. Because I take an approach to this that you haven't seen or experienced before, because, well, let's call a spade, the traditional ways don't always work. And in my viewpoint, it's not that anyone does anything wrong with that, but there's fundamental reasons why they don't work. And a big reason for that is that they deal in the mental aspect of things. Talk therapies, counselling, you're talking all the time. It's only appealing to the conscious part of you. To create a shift in your emotions, we need to get into the emotional part of you back here. And that's what we're going to do in this particular session. So let me come back to it again. What's the emotion you use most often? And the reason is that it's the most familiar and the most comforting, the most comfortable for you. Should we dive into that? I think we should, because I'm not sure how long this episode is going to be. This has got the potential to be a very short and sharp episode. Why? Because I'm going to cut straight to the chase, get straight to the money moments here, so you know exactly why you do what you do. Because let's say, and let's use a hypothetical emotion here of anxiety. That's why so many people come to see me. Anxiety or fear. Why do you use fear? And notice I keep using the word use. You don't have it, you use it. If you haven't listened to that episode, go and listen to that one. I think it's episode maybe 41. You don't have emotions, you use and you do them. So why do we use it? Well, we use anxiety to keep us away from the thing that's making us feel emotionally uncertain or unsafe or out of control. Okay? So let's say, for example, I feel incredibly uncertain, unsafe and insecure around driving a car, as a hypothetical situation here. Now, in driving that car, that makes me feel incredibly unsafe, insecure and out of control. But this could be anything here. This could be something to do with my health. It could be something to do with getting on a plane, whatever it may be. And so driving that car makes me feel these 3 ways. Now, I need to use an emotion right now to be able to drive that car. Why? Well, because in this hypothetical situation, I've got kids, I need to go to work, I need to move around, I need to navigate, and I don't plan on being a hermit who lives in my house for the rest of my life. Therefore, I need to use my car to get around. So I need to use an emotion to be able to deal with the uncertainty, the unsafety, and the out of control feelings that arise from me driving that car, potentially through a personal experience that I've had in the past, potentially through ways that I've developed over time. You staying up with this? Good. Because in this scenario, I need to use an emotion. And once upon a time, way back when, I used to drive a car and I just used to use confidence subconsciously, because I would just drive my car and go driving and not think anything of it. And then there was that one time where, I don't know why, but you know, for another day I would explain why, I had this panic attack behind the car because everything was getting too much for me. And at the time I had this panic attack, and now every time I go to get into the car, I don't feel like I can use confidence because I'm not confident in that area because of that example, because of that event that happened. So now I use anxiety. And I use anxiety, like I said to you a couple of moments ago, as a way of keeping me away from dealing with the uncertainty, the unsafety, and the insecurity that driving a car provides. So what it does is it keeps me over here. It keeps me back, and if you're with me on YouTube, you can see that I'm retracting from the screen now. It keeps me away from dealing with that. And guess what? Now I just get my partner to drive, or I make up an excuse, or I do everything that I can, or I just manage to get through it, but I grin and bear it, but I don't like it, and I manage to just navigate through it. But I've done this for a while now. And remember, I'm using the hypothetical situation here of driving a car, but this could be health, this could be driving, this could be public speaking, this could be stepping onto stage, whatever it may be. I've done this for a while now, to a point where it's become familiar to me. It's become familiar. It's not nice, but it's become familiar. And it's become so familiar that every time I go to get in the car, I use the emotion of anxiety to stop me, or to keep me safe, or to keep me away from dealing with it, or whatever it may be. And it's become so familiar now that it's just what I do. I drive my car and I feel anxious, or I use anxiety and it stops me from driving the car. Are you staying with me on this? Because, like I said to you before, what emotion do you use most? And I'll explain why. And you do it because of these 2 things. It's familiar and it's comforting. I'll get to the second one in a moment. But you've done this for so long now that it's just the natural, quote unquote, thing that you do. And so it's become familiar to you. Another example of this is like a boss at work. Why do bosses, hypothetically, stereotypically, get angry with their employees? You need to do this, you need to do that, and they get angry in this way. Because it's become the familiar emotion that they use to get the result that they want, i.e. their employees to do the work that they need. So they use anger as a way of promoting the work that they need from their employees. Let me find a different example for you. Why is it that you see elite level sports people that when the going gets tough, and for those of you who are listening to this at Easter when I've released this in 2025, literally a couple of days ago you see Rory McIlroy, who wins the Masters and fulfills a dream of his in the golfing world. He's and if you watched his round, he's using multiple different emotions at different times. But ultimately, why does he win golf tournaments? Why does he win at life in the golfing sense? Is because he uses emotions of confidence, of determination, of drive that are in, pun unintended here, the driving seat of his life to produce the results that he wants. If he used fear and worry and dread and overwhelm and doubt, he wouldn't win nowhere near as many golf tournaments as what he's won. So when it comes back to this emotion that you've said, what's the emotion that you use most of? If it's a negative one, like anxiety as an example, Why? It's because it's got to a stage where you've just become familiar with it because it keeps producing the result that you want. And the result that you want, not mentally, emotionally, is to stay away from that thing that makes you feel insecure, out of control and unsafe. And so it's become so familiar for you to just use this to stop you from driving, to get your partner to drive, to get someone else to pick up the kids, to do something else. And if the moments you do, it really ramps up because why? It's become so familiar to you. You use the emotions in your life that are familiar to you. And you go back there time and time again. I did a separate episode on this on the podcast called Creating or Building Your Emotional Home. The same thing of what I'm saying here. I'm just going to it in a deeper way. You use it because it's familiar. What we need to start doing is becoming unfamiliar with it. And you become unfamiliar with it by stop using it. And I know it's easier said than done, as some of you are saying on the screen, but what I mean by that is instead there's 1,001, there's actually a couple of thousand other emotions that you can use to drive that car. There's a couple of other 1,000 emotions that you could use. You could use determination, you could use purpose, you could use confidence, you could use conviction, you could use strength, you could use passion, you could use anger to drive that car. But we use anxiety because it's familiar. What we need to learn to do is start getting into differing states, hear me, differing emotional states to then still get the outcome of what we want. So I'm breaking this down for you because I'm really making this like a detailed session for you. So this might be one that you listen to twice because I'm breaking it down. So it's like, this is like me working with a client right now. I'm really giving you the inside scoop on all of this. So when it comes to any result that we want, let's say the result that I want is that I want to be able to be safe and be okay and feel like I haven't, nothing's going to make me feel uncertain, which is what most of us want. Peace, basically, calm. If I speak to any of my clients, they always say at the start, what do you want? I just want to feel peaceful, man. I just want to feel calm in this area. Cool. To be able to do that, we need to use emotions and become familiar with using these emotions in certain areas. So the emotion that you use most of at the moment is anxiety, because you are familiar with using it about the situations in your life. You use it. What other emotions can you use about those situations in your life, like what I just listed off there? Or calm or peace or whatever else it may be. Because once you understand that, then it's about, right, how do I use calm? How do I use peace? How do I use drive? How do I use determination? Because now you're going to start to use that emotion, and you're going to do it in a way where over a period of time, days, weeks, whatever it may be, that is going to become the familiar emotion that you use more often than not. And guess what? I'll come back to you in a couple of weeks or months and I'll say, what emotion do you use most in your life? And you'll say, peace. Why? Because you have designed it that way. At the moment, this emotion that you're probably listed, which I'm guessing is probably a negative one, is because you haven't designed it and you've just unwittingly been used by your emotions instead of using them. So when it comes, and I'm going to keep bringing this back to driving that car, you are using anxiety and you've used it for a while now and it's become familiar. Not through any shame or blame, but that's what you've been doing. Now it's time to turn the tide on this. So therefore, in whatever area it may be that you want to enhance and you want to better, what emotion would you like to use? Write it down. What's the emotion that you would like to use? If I was using anxiety, and I did because it's familiar, what's the emotion I would like to use? Good. And whatever you've wrote down there, peace, confidence, passion, drive, ask yourself, how do I use it? Because I'm going to revisit this again in a moment once I give you the second thing as the reason why you use that old emotion. I'm going to revisit this, okay? But I just wanted to plant that seed, because the second reason why you use this emotion most often, how many times can I say use in a podcast, by the way? Jesus. The second reason that you use, apparently one more, this emotion is because 1, it's familiar. 2, it's comfortable or it's comforting. It's comfortable or it's comforting. Meaning, guess what? When I go to drive that car, that feels extremely uncomfortable. So I use the emotion to stop me from doing it. And now I'm comforted again in the fact that I don't have to deal with that emotionally uncertain thing. That is why. That is why, guys, we use the emotions. And it is, I know it's backwards the way that I'm explaining this. It's different to what you've heard before. But you've only ever heard things from a mental aspect. I come at them from a deeper emotional aspect. This is how I can help people create shifts in days, and they've been stuck for decades. For this reason alone, I get into the emotional things with people, the depths. And so it's like if I need to have a conversation with my partner that makes me feel really uncomfortable, I might get really nervous, and I'll use nervousness as a way of stopping and telling myself, no, today's not the right day, and then I'm comforted again. I'm comforted in the fact that I don't have to deal with the emotionally uncertain thing. This is what we all do time and time and time and time and time again. Because therefore it becomes so familiar to us that we do it time and time again, and we get rewarded from the comfort of not having to deal with the emotionally uncertain thing that makes us feel unsafe, insecure, out of control and uncomfortable, so therefore it gives us the comfort. The problem is, emotionally it does this. Mentally we're like, I bloody hate it. Am I right? It's like, and I come back to it, and I don't want to tread too much on the toes of the other episode that I did, but it's almost like the home that we live in. We have a home. It's familiar to us. We've been here a while. It's comforting in the sense of it gives me shelter, warmth, but I don't really like it. But guess what? You keep coming back there, and you live there for days, weeks, months, years on end. And some people stay their whole life in that home, even though they don't really like it. Well, here's where this changes, where you become aware of the patterns that I'm explaining to you. You become aware of what's the familiar way that I keep using this emotion. Well, it's funny because I keep using this emotion. I come back to anxiety. I keep using this anxiety every time I feel unsafe about something. That's what I keep using every time. I keep using it. Well, what's the one I want to feel? I want to feel actually passionate or purposeful in that area. Great. Okay, cool. The second reason I've realised why I'm using it is because it gives me the comfort emotionally. Every time I feel uncomfortable about driving, it gives me comfort by actually keeping me over here and stopping me from doing it. Therefore, not making me deal with the emotionally uncertain thing. Right. So I want to use purpose and passion. That's what I want to use. And I'm just giving you a step-by-step process of how you can do this. Great. Well, how am I going to use that? Well, let me give you the steps, shall I? If you wish, of course. Because this is further in detailed, and as I say, this is almost session-like at this stage, what I'm doing with you. But it's incredibly powerful for someone who wants to implement it. Because here's the steps. The first step is this. What is the state, the emotional state of someone who operates like this? If I said to you, behind door number 1 here is someone who is really anxious about life. Picture them in your mind. Now I said behind door number 2 here is someone who is really passionate and purposeful about life. Picture them in your mind. 2 completely different figures sit behind these doors. That's what goes on within you emotionally. So the first question you need to answer is this. What does that person's emotional state look like of purpose and passion? What does that person's emotional state look like full of purpose and passion? Because once you've answered step 1 and you know what that emotional state looks like, you can answer and get to step 2. And step 2 is, how does that person emotionally act when faced with uncertainty? How does that person emotionally act when faced with uncertainty. Because we all face uncertainty in our lives. All of us, every single day. Boss demands something delivered on his desk. There's a bill that needs to be paid. There's a child that all of a sudden hasn't told us they've got food tech in the morning and we need to go out and get their cooking ingredients. We're all faced with uncertainty in our life every single day. How you deal with it will heavily be based on the emotions that you are choosing to use. So step one is, what is the emotional state of that person who uses purpose and passion? What do they look like, basically? And step two is, how does that person act, purpose and passion, when faced with uncertainty? Because if you can answer two of these, you'll give yourself a very clear blueprint. A very clear blueprint of what that person is. Because if you give yourself a blueprint of what that person is and what that person looks like, you have something to step into, an identity to own then, and a being within you that allows you to use that emotion. Like, do you remember when you was a child and you would watch like a superhero film, or you would watch like your favourite sports star or celebrity or music star? Do you remember that? Yeah. And let's say like you had a favourite music star back in the day. Let's say it's like, you know, Madonna, or for some of my younger audience, Miley Cyrus as an example, or anyone this could be. Let's say it's that, and you know, you'd watch them on stage and you'd watch them, and then you'd go, you know what, oh, I want to be like Madonna, I want to be like Miley Cyrus when I grow up. And then what would you do? You'd come away from that and you'd go up to your bedroom and look in front of your mirror as an example, and you would own the state like how Miley Cyrus or Madonna their state of how they are on stage, and you would own it. Or if it was like a sports star, like you would see the way that they carry themselves. How many kids these days do you see do the Ronaldo celebration? Because they get into their state, and then when they get into their state, you start acting like them, you start walking like them. People who do like the Conor McGregor billionaire's strut, for those of us who are into our sports here, you start acting like them, like when you was a kid. And what are the children doing? They have the freedom of thought here to be anything that they want. And what they begin to do is they begin to own and step into the states of how they want to be, unwittingly through their heroes at this point and their idols. And then they start to act and behave like it. And guess what? They do that to a point where then all of a sudden kids have such a vivid and wild, and I want to be like Madonna when I grow up. I'm going to be on stage. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And they start to use the emotions that they want to create that in their life. And then what happens? Well, there's a conditioned adult that comes along that goes, oh, that's lovely, but you might want to think about what happens if that doesn't work out. And it's like, oh, God, cheers. Thanks, adult. Thanks, adult, for getting in the way of the dreams of the child who doesn't have any limiting beliefs or conditions in their way. And this is what happens. But anyway, I digress on this. My point being, children are great teachers. Look at the way that they own the states and they own the actions of the people and the idols that they want to step into. It's the same with ourselves. When I asked you to look at what anxiety looked like behind door one, and what purpose and passion looked like behind door two, there was two different people, I'm sure, that you saw there. And step one is, what does that state look like? Step two is, how do they deal with uncertainty? How do they deal with it? Because that person driving the car with purpose and passion, they see it and they're like, right, come on, you know what, you're in that certain state, you're going to work, you're going to deliver, you're going to do something in that moment. You know what, you're not going to sit there and overthink like the anxious behind door one. You move into action in that moment. You step up, you hold yourself in a certain way, you commit to where it is that you want, you get the kids together, you talk positively, you own that situation. That's how they act when they deal with uncertainty. Step three, you do it. Because guess what? When you do it, and you do it consistently, it becomes familiar. And when it becomes familiar, you will also be rewarded from the fact that you can actually create the comforting nature of this emotion through delivering the results that you want. And like that, you use a new emotion, and that is the emotion that you use most often. this works. And it really can be as simple as the way that I'm explaining it to you. People I work with, I coach them through this. I do this with them. I do this with you, some of you listening to this. I don't always strip it down in these ways, but there's always these frameworks that I'm working with people on to show them how to own these parts of them. Because ultimately, you deserve, and you don't need me to confirm this, to feel and experience any emotion that you want in your life. You do. You don't need me to confirm that you deserve to experience any emotion that you want. Love, purpose, passion, joy, excitement, happiness, fulfillment. But emotions are there to be used, and you have to use them to be able to harness the nature of them. And the emotion that you're using at the moment likely isn't one that is the most appealing to you, but it's familiar and it's comforting, and that's why you do it. We need to replace that. We need to replace that. And you need to replace that with emotions that you want to feel, and you need to answer those two steps. 1, what does the emotional state look like? And 2, how do they act when they're faced with uncertainty? And then step 3, do it. Because when you do it, you'll make it familiar. When you do it consistently, it'll be double familiar. And guess what? You'll get rewarded from the fact that you can find comfort from using this emotion instead of the anxiety, as an example, that actually doesn't serve you. This is what happens on a deeper emotional level. I told you at the start of this podcast, I have ways and methods that people have never seen before, completely different, but I get results that people have never had before. Because I'm interested in the way that drives us emotionally, not mentally. This thing up here, mental side of things, it will lie to you. Oh no, I'm anxious and I'm going to have to buy into this limitation and buy. No, rubbish. It's not who you are. It's not who you were born as. It wasn't always the way. It's just something we've unwittingly made familiar and comforting, and therefore we use it an awful lot now. An awful lot now. I got my language mixed up. I think it's about time we change that. And on Good Friday, what better time to do it? Or Easter Sunday, whenever you're listening to this, what better time to do it? The best time to do it was probably at the start of the year. The better time to do it was probably the year before that. The better time to do it was probably 5 years ago. We better get started sooner rather than later. And of course, if I can serve you in any way, please reach out. I have a wonderful program, my Life Empowerment program, that's starting in the next couple of weeks. If you would like to know more about that, by all means, reach out. In the show notes here, you'll be able to see access to my Instagram, my email. Feel free to reach out my website for further information on what I do. I would love to serve you in further ways. But as I always say, I'm going to leave you with this. Don't let this be a nice listening. Don't let this be a nice listening for you. I appreciate you're spending time with family, with friends this Easter. Make this actionable. The next time you're faced with that uncertainty, what's the emotion I'm going to use? Again, you might need to listen to this podcast twice for it to seep in, because I've gone into some real depth and detail here with you. Don't just let this be a nice listening. Let this be a catalyst for you to take it to the next level. Guys, it's an absolute pleasure bringing you this. I look forward to seeing and serving you again very, very soon. It is time to elevate your mind. Take care.